Malami moves to appoint new Supreme Court justice. On 2023, APC forms as Obi lead Tinubu Atiku Kwankwaso in new poll. Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline project will create wealth. This is coming from the NNPCL boss. And on our debt, Budget Office recommends suspending salary increase and the petrol subsidy, which that can be found on page 19. Big story on the Vanguard, hardship as inflation rate hits 20.5%, highest since 2005. With the rider, food inflation rate stand at 23.1%, NLCC cost of living allowance, and we have suspend new tax and levy. This is coming from NECA. And government policy fueling inflation. This is coming from the NNGAFF president. Looking at hardship and inflation, there's nobody in Nigeria that has not been affected of that. I mean, from the adulterated fuel we have early this year, down to the food inflation prices that we've been having, even looking at our debt increase of getting almost quite a huge amount of money. And we're also looking at borrowing again to be able to, you know, our budget for 2023. We saw on our paper yesterday where the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Bajabiamila, said the President will be presenting our budget by October. Now, if you tend to look at the way things are happening, and we can see presently the Minister of Finance, she stated that we'll stop paying the fuel subsidy for mid-2023. And, you know, questions that Nigerians have been asking is how prepared are we to stop paying the fuel subsidy? And I said we're going to stop. Yes, it's somehow a good step in the right direction. But then take a look at how we fix our local refineries, because we export and still buy our petrol back again, so that the common man can actually have accessibility. But if you look at the inflation price, it's not just on food. Inflation has even affected. Take a look at diesel. We've had some domestic airlines that have actually, you know, shut down as a result of diesel. Yesterday, we saw in the paper where a tanker was being arrested because it has some adulterated, you know, diesel in it. Now, you can see these are back and forth on issues we're going through in the nation, and this has really, really affected the way the economy is presently. And we're looking at what can we do. We saw where we said we're going to look at into the cashew. We saw cotton that I think was it Oyo that was on our paper, looking at the fact that they're highest in Africa. Now, do you know what it means to actually have the highest cotton in Africa? That means we can actually look, what can we do to commercialize that and also create more wealth for Nigeria?
That's always the
Lagos has been stated as being one of the biggest when you talk about market hub in Africa too. So I think we really have to look into what we can do to make life meaningful, because for us to have hardship and inflation rate hitting 20.5% since 2005, then you know that a lot needs to be put in place.
And I feel concerning this subsidy, we don't want the government to just say we are removing it. Let me put it like that, because imagine how much fuel, where are you to?
We're planning on Naira point something. So you could imagine of what friends they did when there was 1 kg of gas of recent. Things have to be done to see how they can normalize the people. And then we're looking at even addressing the issue of pollution, the issue of the ozone layer, left, right. Games athletes coming from Body George and others. The rider following that story says PDP risks lose campaign DG and Wike makes team. More of that on page 26. On insecurity, government has failed Nakasa. You can read that on page 4. And on the train attack, they do that earlier before the issue of the Mamu came up, and also Gumi.
Pavio, where he is still on the 19 planned bomb. And the riders says once Mahdi, ex-U.S. envoy Roselle Hanks, questioned over husband's disappearance. Journalists missing since 1996, and then the U.S. Embassy still mum. You can read more of that story on page 4. And on the right side of the paper, 2023, Atiku, Tinubu, Kwankwaso kicks as Obi leads in NOI poll. No going back on BVAS, says INEC. And on the downside of the paper, soaring food transport cost push inflation to 20.52%. You can read more of that story on page 25. Federal government confers Nigeria citizenship on 286 foreigners. More of that story on page 4. PNB, more of that news after meeting with Obi. If you want to know,
we have on presidency Tinubu Atiku kicks as Obi. Nigeria confers citizenship in 286 for to 17-year needed to boost the African countries. We trust newspaper reading any of the uncovers 400 billion naira budget pending, and we have 50 billion naira ghost workers salaries. I hope more will be done to check who they are cut out to nation building. Buhari reward addicts with national
on top of the 400 billion to Chetima inability to composition on the writer's chair south and high at 20 to formulate implement policies to boost food and we can see a picture.
Yeah, you know, when you look at looking at the issue when Nigerians are crying about the booster attended raises administrator, and the writer say it's dubious, says ruling opposition parties coming from Sowore, and we have credible elections updates, and we hope they print out for everybody to know before the elections too. Federal government disband not force Lyme care expansion deal. Kerry Dodo's mom is dead and she died at the age of 90. We send our condolences. May cost PDP victory, but they jumped. Well, we hope they will look into extra action.
Security Council recommends not force ban. More of that story on page 5. Buhari governors Tinubu condole with Akeredolu over mom's death. More of that story on page 25. 14 Britain, 4 Americans, 268 others get Nigerian citizenship. Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline project will create wealth. And the big story, Bode George, why Atiku may lose next year's poll. No justification for Ayu to remain in office. Tambuwal leads 326-man campaign cancelled. Wike, Makinde, Dopesi, Imoke listed as members. And there's a picture story with the Oni of Ife. And still on the left side of the page, only concrete pact court can end strike, says ASU chair. And there's another picture story of the Southern Youth Rally at Oyo State yesterday. And on the downside of the page, 200 million cash gift, national honor for victorious athletes. And that's all the news on the nation.
All right, let's take a look at the Matrix newspaper. INEC said it is yet to receive certificate court judgment on Opabio. And then we are having other stories here. The Champion League 40-goal club. Luna Mercy urges closer to Cristiano Ronaldo record. You can read up more of that from the Matrix newspaper. APC supporters state solidarity work for Tinubu and Shetima in Ibadan. The big story for the Matrix says, ASU strike union expresses willingness to end the industrial action. The writer following the story, what the federal government needs to do, this is coming from ASU. Student ground activities and block highways. Yulodochi tells students what to do next. And we have Buhari Honors Team Nigeria Athletes confers OON on Amusan. Lagos to short Lapido and Oyibo markets. Sanwo-Olu attend Queen Elizabeth Commemoration Service. Nigeria's inflation rate rises to 20.52% in August, says the MBS. Downside, we have relatives of the Kaduna-Abuja train victims appeal to federal government to release Mamu because they have so depend on him as a negotiator to actually negotiate. We hope the federal government will look into rescuing the lives of those people in the dens of the bandits. And that's on the Matrix newspaper.
And the Nigeria Tribune called others INEC to accept Opabio as APC senatorial candidate. PDP names Wike as member of Presidential Campaign Council. Tambuwal leads heads 326-member organization as Director General. You can read that on page 23. Afe Babalola backs National Postgraduate Medical College Fellowship Award. You can read that on page 2018. Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline project will create wealth, says Kyari. Governors commiserate with Akeredolu over mother's death. More of that story on page 5. And still on the 2023 presidential election, Atiku Tinubu dismisses NOI polls on Obi's lead. Poll says Obi leading with 21%. Atiku Tinubu ties at 13%, page 5. I believe that Atiku and Tinubu will not agree with this poll. Maybe if it was coming from INEC, they will say yes, is the body that we trust. But even if I was to be in their shoe, I'll say it's a lie. But then it's a poll, and I want to believe that it's maybe giving them some signs that, okay, you need to sit up. Even for the start, this is the beginning, I want to believe. So it's too quick to agree to some extent. But if these are polls going on and people are actually responding to this poll, then instead of them sitting down and saying it's a lie, then perhaps they need to sit up. Yes. All right. On the still on the Nigerian Tribune, on the left side of the paper, Nigeria inflation's rate hits 20.52%. You can read more of that on page 7. Lagos impounds 4,694 Okada, convicts 1,490 suspects in 4 months. More of that story on page 27. NSIA signs over $100 million healthcare agreement with Kaduna, Kwara, Enugu, and 5 medical centers. More of that story on page 25. And on the right side of the paper, students block Ibadan Ife Expressway over ASU strike. And there's a picture story showing you exactly what it looks like and how motorists are not finding it funny. You can read more of that story on page 19. And that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
All right, let's take a look at what the Punch newspaper have to say. ICPC uncovers 400 billion naira fraud in 2021 and 2022 budgets. Nigeria-Morocco begins a 5,600-kilometer gas pipeline project. Federal government suspend the third airline as aviation crisis persists. We have Makinde Odom leads Atiku 326-member campaign team, with more on page 14. Vote president who won't compromise, Jonathan advised the youths. Still on the 20.52% inflation, economic crisis, job losses worsen, food prices soar. As we have the writer saying NACCIMA worries over rising prices, says companies face tougher times. Inflation spike will throw more Nigerians into poverty, says the LCCI. And I hope we'll look into that, because right now, if you take statistics of Nigeria, most of which cannot even live above $1 per day. So you could see that a lot needs to be done to lift lots of Nigerians out of poverty. And we know the answer to that. All we need to do is implement it, and then things will be better. Now, we have Buhari reward Amusan, Brumen, and others with honors, and we have 200 million naira cash prize. Student block Efe Ibadan Road ASU lease pending demands. And Lagos impounds 4,694 Okadas, conveyed 1,490 offenders. And the last story here, appointment of the Supreme Court Justice faulty, says SANS, which that you can find on page 8. And that's all on the Punch newspaper.
And the New Telegraph, reps ask PENCOM to account for 12 billion naira expenditure. Inflation surged to 20.52% in August, says NBS. And you can read that on page 3. Still on the election, Jonathan visits Abdulsalami IBB. You can read more of that story on page 3. Udom Tambuwal head PDP presidential campaign. You can read more of that story on page 5 and 8. Federal government confers Nigeria citizenship on 286 foreigners. Cut to INEC, accept Akpabio as APC senatorial candidate for for Akwa Ibom and Northwest. You can read more of that on page 26. And on the big story, NDA's padded 2021-2022 budget with 300 billion naira and 100 billion naira, says ICPC. You can read more of that story on page 4. And there's a picture story still with the president and celebrating the athletes who have made us proud in the past months. And on the right side of the paper, still on the 2023, vote people of unassailable integrity, Catholic Bishop advise Nigeria. And I pray that more and more religious leaders will come out and keep telling us to do the right thing. In as much as I would personally want them to be very direct, but if they refuse, I want to believe that perhaps on the news they will not come out and say they are candidates, but in their churches, in where they have a congregation listening to them, I hope that they will vividly come out and point the church to the right direction. And if you want to know more of what he said, you can read that on page 4. Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline project will create wealth, says Kyari. You can read more of that on page 2. NSIA commits $100 million to healthcare expansion with state. And on the downside of the paper, still on the strike, court can't force us to teach with open mind, says ASU. Says students will be at receiving end. Collective bargaining, not threat, will break results or will not break or resolve our members. So they are saying that the government shouldn't threaten them, but rather do the right thing. Well, to some extent, the student will be at the receiving side. That's a fact. But then everybody should play their own part, and I pray that they will come to a conclusion very soon. Still on 2023 election, Obi leads Tinubu Atiku in opinion poll. Konkoso trails behind in preference. Tinubu PCC unperturbed by NOI poll. Delta pilgrims fast, pray for Atiku and Okowa. And more of those stories on page 4, 26, and 29. There's a study here, cancer in adults under 50 linked to inactivity. You can read more of that on page 26, and that's all the news on New Telegraph.
All right, on First News, we have MDAs pay 49.9 billion naira salaries to goes work in 6 months. This is coming from the ICPC, which we've seen in most of our papers. National Security Council declares net force illegal, orders immediate disbandment. IU must resign if PDP will win the 2023 election, still coming from Bode George. And on 2023 presidency, polls give Peter Obi head start over Tinubu and Atiku. Predict Labour Party presidential flag bearer likely the winner. Says Obi will win if presidential election was held today. As APC campaign council kicks declare poll dubious. Only concrete agreement can end the strike. This is coming from ASU. And the court have orders INEC to recognize Akpabio as a senatorial candidate. Still on 2023, Wike appoints into the PDP Presidential Campaign Council, Tambuwa named the DG. Buhari confers Nigerian citizenship on 4 Americans, 14 Britons, Spanish Prof 253 others. And also, court have ordered INEC to recognize Akpabio, which also we've seen it as a senatorial candidate. ASWAP sniper chief prosecutor killer in airstrike in Borno. And we see abusive wife beats of police officer in Lagos. It's really, really funny and also confusing. Well, we hope whatever the issue is, issue of abuse, domestic violence, and all that will be reported to the right authority so they can address that. The last story here, Governor Akpabio, I may become king after office. You can read more of that on First News. And that's all the First News. But before we move to the business day and also other papers we have lined up this morning, we'd like to take a break where we can open the phone lines for our callers so you can call us. And also remember, we're live on Facebook and YouTube. Do well to drop your comment on any of the story that's of interest to you, especially the issue of inflation that has been the highest in the last 17 years. This is really a sad that one. So we'd like to hear what you have to say about that. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after the break. Thanks for staying tuned. It's still the Dailies on Echo Television International. We've been looking at various stories that have been flying on our Nigerian newspaper, especially the issue of inflation in Nigeria and also in the whole of Africa. Quite very worrisome, looking at food inflation, transport, and other things that are related with it. So our numbers are displayed on your screen. We'd love you to call us and let us hear what your views are, what you feel about this, your opinions, and what did you think the government can do to actually provide solutions so that Nigerians can actually have a meaningful life. We're also live on Facebook, so you can do well to drop your comment there, or you can call us and we can actually share and interact together. Rachel Tanzi is still here with me. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Sarah.
Let's move further to business day.
All right. On the business day, another CBN rate hike expected as inflation hits 20.52%. Nigerian banks' return on equity lags Kenyan, South African peers. And there's a big story. New poll puts Obi in strong lead over Atiku and Tinubu. However, Tinubu Kwankwaso dismisses poll as devious and misleading. And there's a picture story with the Oni of Ife. Nigeria-Morocco gas project will create
we
wealth.
Have to call a story, Rachel. Hello, good morning. And if you can hear us, please go on with your contribution. Okay, I think we lost our caller. If you can call us back, we'll really appreciate it. Please, let's go on, Rachel. Sorry for the interruption.
Still on the business day, Nigeria-Morocco gas project will create wealth, NNPC boss. How Nigeria wedding planners survive amid economic crunch. You can see that on page 2. NESG Economic Action Agenda 1993. You can turn to page 14 and 19 to probably remind yourself about that. How Nigeria, others can avoid chronic food insecurity. All right, we have Sam back.
Hello?
Sam, please go on.
Hello, Sam, we can hear you going.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello? Good morning, Rachel and Co.
Good morning.
Hello? Good
We
morning,
can hear you,
Rachel
Mr.
and
Sam.
Co.
Please just go on. Mr. Sam, are you still there?
That was conducted on behalf of the 3 leading candidates. The result.
Okay, Mr. Sam, I think you're still talking about the 3 presidential candidates.
Yes,
well,
and the poll.
whatever your views are, you can actually drop it on our Facebook and we'll try to read the completion of whatever you intended to say.
Right, yes, and that was all the news on the business day.
All right, let's take a look at the Guardian newspaper. We have appointment policy on the Supreme Court Justice Flock. The senior lawyers tell the NJC. We have federal government declares net force illegal, orders immediate disbandment. Akwere Dodo is treated harshly, unwell, may not be granted bail, says the UK lawyer. Detail can be found on page 27. We hope that Nigerian lawmakers can actually interfere and see what can be done about that. Still on Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline project will create wealth, says the NNPCL boss. We have rising cost, supply chain disruption, worsen inflation. may spring out of control if triggers are not addressed, expert warn. Higher interest rate heighten loan default put banks at risk, says Moody. What's yet to come unless the government contains importation? Well, we've been talking about all importing of goods. We hope more will be done about that. And we have taking prepaid free health service to far-flung undeserved communities. That is a big story that can be found on page 4 and 5. We can see various picture stories of people on talking about underserved community. And we're talking about when we're going to have enlightenment or we're going to awareness, we should go down to those communities that they hardly get to see any free healthcare, primary healthcare, systems there. And even if they do, if you just take a look at it, they're dilapidated. Nothing can be written home about it. There's nothing working there. So we hope the government can also come to the rescue of these people and offer them all this free health that they need. Because if you look at the cholera, we're talking about the Lassa fever, most of these victims are coming from the rural area. So we hope the government will be able to look into that and provide solution also.
And we keep saying everything stops at the urban level. And you can see that now they get to have prepaid health services, in the sense that we have such services here where you can get a service and probably pay much later. And you can see that now these people not only get access to this healthcare, but they also have the options available for them to pay instrumentally or before or after the treatment. Either way, they get to pay. So I'm happy that this is not just stopping at this place, but as we keep saying, let it go to where it's needed. They also need it in the villages, they need it in the rural areas. Let it not stop at one place. So I feel this is a good news and something we hope will grow bigger.
Of course. Well, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On Nature News, Nigeria cashew to make $1.2 billion by 2030, says expert. And this is 8 years from now. So if we can make this much 8 years from now, then this is something that shouldn't be slept. And I feel the next government coming in, this exactly the years that they will spend if they get to have the opportunity of 2 tenure. So if they should look into this seriously, then by the time they are gone, Nigeria should start being able to even survive without crude oil, and this money will be able to even start paying some of our debt, because we're talking about $1 billion here, not millions, but in billions of dollars. And then there's a big picture story. 2022 raining season, flood ravages Nigeria. Expect more disaster, NIHSA. And 300 Nigerians killed so far, and by NEMA. You can read more of that story on page 3. And to be honest, I haven't seen a picture about this flood, and I'm just seeing it and realizing how bad it is. It almost looks like there are no houses there, but they're just buried in the rain. And you can imagine this is the committee, and it looks like it's just a lagoon or just a pond or something like that. And on the downside of the paper, majority of Germans want FIFA to compensate Qatar's migrant workers. And you can read more of that story on page 21, and that's all the news on Nature.
All right, let's take a look at the Daily Independent. So we have SAN hit the CGN NGC over selection of Supreme and Appeal Court juries. You can read more of that on Daily Independent. And NCAA ground Asma Air over 1.2 billion naira debt, failure to renew the ATL. Big story, Buhari gives security agency December to end insecurity. The writer following that story, Security Council orders immediate disbandment of the net force. Mahmoud's arrest won't stop rescue of the remaining train victims coming from the federal government. And PDP may lose presidential election if IU fails to resign. Still coming from Bode George. Court orders INEC to accept Akpabio as senatorial candidate. And Buhari confers Nigerian citizenship on 286 Lebanese, Britain, and others. We have still on the Nigeria inflation, rises to 20.52% in August, highest in 17 years. Last story, which is at the downside of the paper, we have NSIA seek healthcare expansion part with 3 state and 5 medical center. Detail on page 6. That's all on Daily Independence.
On the blueprint, MDA's padded 2021-2022 budget with 400 billion naira duplicated project. The ICPC tracks 49.9 billion naira ghost workers' salary from January to June 2022. Reps query Pencom's 2.4 million naira monthly salary per staff. And then on the big story, Odili Tanko Aboki's exit depletes JSCs from 21 to 13. And the writer says CJN Ariwola laments yawning gap, drastic workload. Body of SAN's fourth process of appointing judges. Any delay in filling the gaps will spell doom for judiciary. You can see more of that story on page 6. And on the left side of the paper, ASU willing to call off strike if, says Oso Deka. And then you can read more of that on page 5. Tambuwa emerges Atiku campaign director general. And at the downside of the paper, despite hiccups, the 95% of Nigerian pilgrims participated in 2022 Hajj. This is coming from NAHCON. You can read more of that on page 9. Nigeria grants citizenship to 286 Americans, Europeans, and others. DMO unveils Nigeria's 720 billion naira borrowing plan. You can see more of that story on page 7. We're expanding our services beyond Africa, says UBA General Managing Director. You can read more of that on page 23. Justice Ogunbiyi takes over PSC, pledges rule of law. You can read more of that story on page 7. Thousands queue overnight to pay respect at Queen's lying in state. You can read more of that story in page 5, and that's all the news on Blueprint.
On the Voice of Liberty, National Security Council hails the current strategy against insecurity. On 2023, APC not threatened by dubious fake NOI poll predicting victory for Peter Obi. The statement is coming from Tinubu, the APC presidential candidate. National security deteriorating, Nigeria scampering for safety. This report is coming from Khan. Call for Gumi arrest, touch cleric, touch fire, Northern youth won. Following the call for the arrest of the Kaduna-based Islamic scholar Ahmed Abubakar Gumi, the Northern Youth Council of Nigeria have warned that anyone who touches the cleric will have it to contend with. Well, I hope that the federal government is listening closely to the statements that are coming from the Northern, Northern Youth Forum, and also something will be done about that. If Mamu can be arrested, then I think it will be the right thing to begin to ask Gumi some questions, because Mamu is an aide to Gumi, and it's expected that possibly, even though we are not certain, we hope that with interrogation being done, questions being asked, we'll be able to get the right answers and know what to do. We'll not just work on blind judgment at the end of the day, but regardless of what religion you belong to.
Yes, exactly. I was going to say, like, nobody is above the law. Even religious-wise, we know that our Bible tells us that we are subject to our authority because God placed them there. So if the authority says we need to question this person, I don't think anybody should come out with a threat and say you dare not touch that person, even if he's a cleric. They're not saying they will arrest the person. They're not saying he's a criminal yet. But if there's a need to question him or to put him under whatever investigation, that should go on. If it will give us answers and find the solution to whatever the problem is. I don't think any cleric or the youth should come out and warn, because this is a threat. What are you going to do? Are you trying to threaten that, okay, something bad will happen? Or what are they saying? I don't think this should be taken
lightly.
Yes, it shouldn't.
Okay.
It shouldn't.
Possibly the government should follow up the statement.
should.
Well, let's look at other stories still on the Voice of Liberty. Overperformance claim you have been a sleeping president. PDP hits Buhari, and this is what we've been avoiding. When the APC came in, they spent most of their time blaming the PDP for their downfall. I hope the PDP are not planning to walk in that same direction. Yeah, of course, they should be wise enough to know that when they come in, they should start walking and not talk about.
They should mind their business and talk about what they plan to do for Nigerians and work on it, and not to start talking, because it took up till today, I feel APC still mentions the past administration. We don't want a repeat of that. Gone are those days. Just mind your business, leave the past behind you, work, and let's see the results.
Of course, of course. On 2023, why I'm insisting Ayu must quit as the PDP national chairman. Still coming from Olabode George. You can read more of what he has to say about that. And on 2023, will arrest, catch all known religious terrorists, kidnapping sponsor, and leaders before election. This is coming from the DG of the DSS, Bachi. This is an assurance he is giving Nigerians. Still a countdown on the Kaduna-Abuja train victims. They have spent 171 days in captivity. That's all on the Voice of Liberty.
On the point, we're starting with a picture story of a gridlock. Commuters demand action from federal government on Lagos-Ibadan Expressway gridlock. And the rider says, recount life abridging experiences. Be disciplined. Federal government caution motorists. You can read more of that on page 2. Inflation rate highest in Ebonyi, Rivers, Bayelsa, as Nigeria records 20.52% rise in August. Buhari confers citizenship on 286 foreign nationals. South won't vote PDP Atiku if Ayu remains chairman. That's coming from Bode George, and you can see more of that news on page 2. Respite for Akpabio has court ordered INEC to accept him as APC senatorial candidate. And if you want to know more on that news, you can read that on page 2, and that's all the news on the point.
All right, let's take a look at an international paper, which is the Times Malta. And the story here, we have top education official who resigned made ahead as the ITS. And we have Frank, the former Education Performance Secretary, who resigned following an ethic probe, has been appointed General Manager of the training schools at the Institute for Turkish Studies. His new job will be to implement the new ITS strategy plan launched last year, which includes a training school for thousands of workers within the industry. And we can see here, they say he stepped down as the permanent secretary last January. Well, we have another story here. 6-year-old girl fighting for her life after rescue. The girl drank a lot of seawater during the crossing, causing acute sodium poisoning and severe dehydration. Well, this really is a sad one. I know this story actually caught my mind, where a top education officer resigned and was made the head. Now you see, we always talk about if you feel that possibly you're not capable, you should resign, and maybe your resignation will actually show that you have some honor and some respect, and maybe you have other attention to focus in another place. So possibly we're having issues of leadership not going in the right direction, because some people are actually leading in the wrong sector.
Yeah,
when you go to the right sector, you'll be able to give your best in that place. But when you're working in the wrong place, we always see that something bad always happens at the end of the day, because you end up not giving your best. You end up fighting with the policy, the vision, the mission of that place, and at the end of the day, you don't give your best. So
we need a lot of that here in Nigeria. We need a lot of people knowing that, okay, I don't belong in this sector. I need to resign. I need to find my place, because I'm not delivering as I should where I am. Because a lot of problems we have is the head, the leadership, the director general, the this and this here and there. You find out that if the head is faulty, every other thing will not work. You see mismanagement. Some people are not even designed to be able to manage some certain amounts of. Just find your place and you would function well. And there's no harm in you resigning, because you know, okay, I'm not doing my best here. And as you said, it proves that you have some honor and you want the best for a certain place, rather than just staying and watching it go down because of your ego, or you feel you cannot leave this place.
Yeah, of course. And that's all on the Times Malta paper.
Okay, on the Punch spot, you can see Messi overtake Ronaldo in UCL record. And Alba said at Tuchel exit, that's the Chelsea coach leaving, Benzema losing fitness battle for Madrid derby. You see Pesero invites Onzoa for Algeria friendly. Makinwa hopeful of Sadiq's early return, and we can see the scores between Midtjylland and Lazio 5-1. We can see Ronaldo off the mark in Devils win. Omoniyi Oyono exclusive. None of us could afford to pay $18 for a SOA, so we stayed for days without having our bath. That doesn't sound good. And then we can see Liverpool lead United in Bellingham chase. Saka close to new Arsenal contract. I feel Arsenal will be happy to have Saka. He's still a very young player, still vibrant, still winning goals for them. If he should go, it will be a loss on their side, because I want to believe many other clubs will want him and are willing to pay whatever amount because he's still young and scoring for them. So yes, Arsenal should do whatever it takes to keep Saka with them. And that's all the news on Punch Sport.
All right, thank you so much, Rachel. And that's a wrap on the dailies. Thank you so much to all our crew members. Thank you to those who are for Sam for trying to call us. And thank you also to our viewers for always keeping a date with us. Do have a blessed weekend ahead. Bye.